Wednesday night, May 23rd, 2001. A bunch of old Remington Rand retirers, like me, retirees, are having our 6-month banquet. I'm the secretary. Tonight, our guest speaker will be Larry Bachman. Larry was a B-24 pilot that flew out of England. Formerly president of Bachman Flowers, in fact. Here he comes.
Subject that's near and dear to my heart. I want to go through just a couple of missions to give you a feel for what went on. I kept very accurate records of each mission I flew, including date, of course, weather conditions, flak or fighters, target, obscured or clear, and bomb load, fuel load, and so forth. Target Bielefeld, Germany, a marshalling yard. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, that's an assembly point where trains are made up. They come all over the country. They bring them into a certain area, make up trains to go on to other places. Good place to deal with transportation. Anything we could do to disrupt the German transportation was important to us. Disrupting oil, such as those raids on Polesti in Romania. That was a synthetic oil plant, and other oil plants throughout all of Germany and its surrounding areas. Those were crucial targets. Ball bearing factories, factories that turned out aircraft or turned out tanks or trucks and so forth. These were all prime targets. Someone asked earlier, how did the decision ever get made that the U.S. would do daylight bombing? Well, this was a controversial issue, of course, but they kept looking at the record that the RAF had established by that time, flying nothing but nighttime missions. And there were an awful lot of nighttime flights that had been successful, but they could not pick out specific targets. It was more blanket bombing to a certain area and just drop your bombs and take what you will in the way of damage. Here is a situation where they decided if we were to go over there in daylight, we would stand an awfully good chance of seeing the targets ahead of time, being able to use the Norden bomb sight, which the British did not have. We would be able to pinpoint, pick out our targets and drop bombs on them with the Norden bomb sight. Obviously, it exposed us to greater risks than the RAF. The RAF thought we were crazy to fly during the daytime. There were other advantages and certainly a lot of other disadvantages, but basically that decision was made, and the U.S., right to start with and forevermore, flew daytime missions. In this particular case, there was moderate flak, none at the target area, but we saw bursts between Hanover and Osnabrück about 10 minutes past the target. There were no holes in our ship. Severe evasive action was taken. But on the way out, after dropping the bombs, our formation was in cloud cover. We flew into one of the biggest cumulus clouds you ever saw in your life. And everybody, of course, went out or up or down or whatever, trying to get away from the ship. You don't fly tight formation under those conditions as a rule. I had taught instrument flying for 3 months before I went overseas after I graduated from advanced training, and I guess I prided myself in being able to fly pretty good formation flying. I was flying as an alternate lead to the man in charge that day, and I decided when he hit that cloud he had to drop his eyes down to the instrument panel and read direction, speed, and so forth, and he would not alter it. I knew he'd be going into the cloud at that level and he'd come out the other end the same way. And I decided we can stay right where we are. Yeah, I bounced out a little bit so we weren't real close, but we too came out together. All the rest of them scattered. The fighters were sitting above that cloud waiting for this to happen, and they picked off. Out of my squadron that day, we had launched 10 ships. We lost 8 ships out of the 10. I was the only one to get back to the base. The other guy got back to Belgium and crash landed in Belgium with some damage to his plane, but ultimately got back. The others I have no idea what happened to them. I know they were shot down, whether they wound up as prisoners of war or whether they bailed out or crash landed or what, I do not know. But that was my indoctrination to the first mission. And at that time, I've got to tell you, I was over there when the odds were 50% that you would not make it through your assigned missions. So it was kind of a trying situation, to say the least. First mission wasn't too bad. Second one was a little bit harder to start out on. Felt a little bit different about what we were headed for. But on the second mission, the target was Arweiler, Germany, another rail yard and supply depot. Very successful mission. It was cloudy over home base, but it was clear over the continent. Moderate but accurate flak, which began shortly before the IP or initial point. We got to headings, and then you turned onto this initial point, which was a pre-described heading. And at that point, you turned it over to your bombardier, and your bombardier flew the airplane from the bomb site. He actually, by maneuvering, was responsible for up and down and in and out. And that flak actually lasted clear over the target, but we were not hit. We were alerted to watch for fighters in the target area, and we know that we saw P-51s engage Me-109s. That was the first time I saw the 109s up fairly close. We got 17 flak holes in our aircraft that time. A large piece just missed the head of our flight engineer in the top turret. And we were subjected to 28 minutes of continuous flak on that mission. Our bomb load that day was 12 500-pound general purpose bombs. Gas load 2,500 gallons. Our gross weight was 63,000 pounds. I'm going to skip around on these because I don't intend to read all of them by any means, but I want to point out a few of these missions that we could call typical. Target was Magdeburg, Germany, marshalling yard. Very good fighter support. They were in sight from assembly to return. Perhaps the largest number of planes I've seen to date. I was on a mission later. This particular mission, there were 1,000 planes that went to the same target. Later, we had one mission where we had 3,000 planes hitting the same target. 3 hours from the time the first one dropped their bombs to the time the last one flew over the target and dropped their bombs. This was saturation bombing at its best. 1,000 planes this particular day flew and hit that single target. Weather was fairly poor, but did not interfere too much. We encountered heavy flak, but it was not accurate. Flak was next encountered from the IP to the target. It was very accurate, but we were not hit. A poor lead. We encountered flak at Hanover on the way out. We saw one ship blow up. It was a mighty long trip out. We bombed from low left element lead and returned in the number 3 position. Bomb load 10 500-pound general purpose bombs. Gas load 2,700 gallons. Gross weight 64,500 pounds. Salzburg in Germany, oil refinery. 10/10 over the target. In other words, obscured by clouds. Results were unobserved. Flak was quite heavy at the Rhine, but we were not close to it as our target was 5 miles ahead of the Rhine River. Flak was barrage type. No damage resulted to us. We dropped our bombs on Novak's tail. He was a fellow from our squadron who flew beneath us in tight formation, and he kept crossing under us time after time after time. Now, when we were on the IP with the bomb bay doors open, we finally broke radio silence and told him to get the hell out of there, because we did not have any control over when our bombs were to drop. There were 2 ways of dropping bombs. One was on radio signal from the lead ship. I'm skipping ahead here, and I got to tell you this. I'll back up just a little bit and tell you that we shipped overseas with a bombardier, a member of our crew. We got over there, and they sent our bombardier back to the States to be retrained as a navigator. A bombardier accompanied the lead ship, deputy lead, and alternate lead only. From there on, we dropped by radio signal off that ship or by smoke bombs that they dropped. The minute we saw those smoke bombs, we then dropped our bombs. The nose gunner had a toggle switch right in his turret, and he could drop the bombs from that. In this case, we shut that switch off so that we weren't responsible for when those bombs went out. But that radio signal, of course, was what triggered it. And as he came under us, we let our bombs drop. I mean, we didn't do it, but the signal did. Can you imagine sitting in that tail turret looking up and seeing those bombs come down and take everything off your side? Here's a stabilizer and a rudder that suddenly disappeared. And he's sitting in that turret. I wouldn't have been very comfortable either. But at any rate, they flew back to our base. When we all got back there, our base was socked in, 10 tenths cloud cover, and they diverted us back to France. It was one of those long missions where we tried to land. We made 2 or 3 attempts to get to a field that was open. They had him trying to go to more fields. They gave him 4 alternate fields, but by the time he got from where he was to that next field, it too was socked in. They finally said, go up to 4,500 feet and bail your crew, which he did. He bailed out. Now, he himself got out from behind the pilot's seat and reached over the pilot's seat and held the controls while his co-pilot got out of the seat. Co-pilot dropped out of the bomb bay doors, safe, and when he let go of the controls, the ship immediately dropped its nose and pinned him up against the ceiling. It made 2 tight turns and the wing broke off. When the wing broke, he fell to the floor and got out of it, just as the ship blew up. It blew up in the air. He got cut over the eyebrow, and he got burned with part of the flames that ignited, but made a safe landing by parachute. And we went to see him in the hospital afterwards. And his crew, to a man, walked up to the CO of our base and said, "We'll never fly with that bastard again." So assign us back to him. He steadfastly refused to follow their direction or our direction to get out from under, and that was the result. He was from northern Minnesota, and I do see him once in a while. We don't have a lot to talk about together anymore, I'll tell you that. Let me go through just a couple more here. I don't want to keep you too long. But, Nuremberg, Germany, railway station, quite intense flak on the way in, but inaccurate. All planes of the 8th Air Force hit the same target. That's the one of the 3,000 planes. Never seen such a bomber stream. We made a 360-degree turn on the bomb run. The forts went in first and encountered no flak whatsoever. Libs came in next and encountered a lot of flak. We suffered no damage. We also caught very accurate flak over Freiburg on the way out. Several ships were hit. We sweat out flak, but gas was the real problem. We landed with 500 gallons, but our gauges didn't show it. The bomb load that day was 10 500-pound RDX bombs, gas load 2,700 gallons, gross weight 64,000 pounds. Possibly another one, and then I'll skip back to one that I've passed over and tell you probably the most traumatic one that we had. Schaffensburg, Germany, tank arsenal. We were briefed for the above target, but weather forced us to pick targets of opportunity. Unfortunately, the choice of our leader was a very bad one. His navigator messed up, and we wound up bombing Switzerland. Neutral country. We were separated from the main force by weather. We found out that the German Air Force was definitely not dead because they followed us back and picked off a Mosquito airplane from the RAF that was landing at our base. They passed over our field but did not fire. They hit one of a convoy of our trucks and killed the driver. The truck was a mess of holes. Bomb load that day was 10 500-pound Navy bombs. Gas load 2,700 gallons topped off. That was 2,770 gallons. Gas the gross weight there is 64,000 pounds. The thing I wanted to add to this that I can tell you about that I didn't write up at the time was that the man that was leading the mission that day was the general of one of the 2nd Air Division wings, and he was leading the entire formation that day. So when we tagged on to him, we thought, well, that's a pretty good deal. We got the right guy anyway. And as we approached Switzerland, our navigator told us we're headed toward Switzerland. And we broke radio silence, which we shouldn't have done either, but we simply said to the lead ship, check your position. The answer came back, follow me. So we continued to follow. And as we crossed the border and our navigator said we are now over Switzerland, we again broke silence and said, check your position. Follow me. Then he came through with another announcement, open bomb bays. There were 6 of us, 5 others that had joined him, so a total of 6 aircraft. We went over this particular town and he signaled our bombs out and we dropped our bombs. Later I heard that we paid $50 million in reparations to Switzerland, but we did hit a ball bearing factory. I'm convinced to this day that he knew exactly where he was going. Now, obviously, it was a mistake, quote unquote, but I'm sure he knew what he was doing. Because when we got back, I thought riot squad would meet us. You know, there was no question about we were in Dutch trouble. Nobody said one darn thing. We reported accurately exactly what we had done, what happened. I thought sure we were going to hear nothing but grief about it. But we were never called on the carpet for it, never ever told about it again. So I wanted to tell you that things turned out all right. And I'm sure we got a target that he really was truly looking for. We paid a lot of money for it, but at least we cut off a supply of ball bearings to Germany, who was using them in truck, tank, aircraft, and all other modes of transportation. Here's one that I need to tell you about. Target Royan, France, shore gun emplacements. Here is an area where the Germans had been forced to the sea by French and American forces, pushed into a pocket down at Royan, France, which is a coastal city, and there were 50,000 of them that were pushed in that area, and they were cut off from their supply lines. No German ships could go into the channel and supply them. There was no food coming. They would go out at night and steal cattle and chickens and eggs, anything they could get their hands on to feed themselves. And the French took that for a while and then finally said, we've got to do something about this. We can't let this go on. So the powers that be decided we would make a raid. Our ship was shut down for 3 days while they retrofitted our bomb racks, and they put 2 Mae West tanks in the forward bomb bays. The B-24 has 2 separated bomb bays, and then each side. These contained what we called Mae West tanks that were used to ferry the planes overseas that carried a lot of fuel in each of those, 300 and some gallons per tank. In the back bomb bay, they attached 6 P-51 paper mache droppable wingtip tanks. These were what allowed the P-51s to follow us ultimately all the way to Berlin and back again without refueling. But our load that day was napalm. I don't know if all of you know what napalm is, but it's a gas and sticky material. Ignites when it hits air. As long as there's no air to it, it's inert and doesn't do anything serious. But the minute air hits it, everything it clings to burns. We were told we would carry no gunners. We had a nose gunner and a tail gunner, but waist gunners were taken out, top turret gunners were taken out. The guns were taken out, no ammunition aboard the ship other than for the 2 turrets that were left. And lighten the load any way we could, because it was a very heavy load that we were carrying. The ship that took off ahead of me crashed on takeoff, and I went up through the flames of that aircraft. And I'll never forget this scene as long as I live. I could see the guys clawing at the side of the ship trying to get out. Of course, nobody made it. They were killed, all of them. And the flames immediately went far beyond us. We flew through those flames to take off. We got down there, and we could see that target because previously other ships had hit the target ahead of us. And the clouds and black smoke and flames were higher than what we were flying at. We flew through the same conditions then when we got to that target. We dropped at 15,000 feet. We dropped our napalm. Gas poured out so fast that it could not run out of the bomb bays. We were carrying 4 to 6 inches of gas in the bomb bays. If anybody's looked into the bomb bay of B-24, you know it's wide open. You could throw a cat through the openings that are in there. But the gas couldn't run out fast enough. There was a stream of gasoline about close to 3 inches in diameter just spewing out of that transfer pump area. We lost 1,800 gallons of gas in less than 20 minutes. At that point, we had one outboard engine that we could feed gas to. The other 3 were feathered, and we came back over 60 miles on one outboard engine, losing altitude all of the way. And I spotted a P-51 on a field in France, and I thought, well, it's got to be in the hands of Americans if there's a 51 on there. So I had suggested to the crew that if they wished to bail out, fine and dandy. I thought we were back over the lines so that we'd be in friendly territory. They wouldn't be picked up as prisoners, but that I was going to try to take it in. I said, if you're going in, we're going in with you. So we attempted the landing. We had 7 1,000-pound bombs aboard. My first inclination was to get rid of the bombs, and my nose gunner, who was our armor, said, hell no, don't. I thought, boy, are you trying to countermand an order? I want to get this plane lightened up. We've got a long way to go. And then it dawned on me why he said that. In the bomb bay, those racks they're hung from, on the front of every bomb is a spinner. That spinner is held in place with a copper wire that goes through that joint on the spinner, and it's attached to the rack itself, to the bomb rack that's hanging from. And when that bomb drops, it gives off a spark. Obviously, we would have 7 chances to blow up. So the armor did his thing right, and everybody else did too. Our engineer tried to stuff an A3 bag in that flow of fuel, burned his eyes, his eyebrows with 100-octane gas, froze his hands because, again, I don't know how many of you know that at altitude, the altitudes we flew even in the summertime there, it's about 54 below zero at 20,000 or 22,000 feet where we most frequently bomb from. And there's a wide, wide opening as you look forward in the 24. It's nothing to keep the air out. You have electric suits, and you can plug those in. Electric gloves, electric half-inch felt boots that you can wear. You put all the sheepskin and wool on that you could. You wear wool uniforms. I'll divert for a moment and tell you, every Hollywood film I've seen is so inaccurate as to the appearance of the pilots and crew. You can't believe you're in the same field at all.
Yeah.
We had not only our helmet goggles on, but a tin pot over that to keep flak from hitting you on the head. And the only armament on a B-24 was a 1/4-inch thick piece of steel on the outside of both pilot and co-pilot area that was about that high and maybe 3.5 feet in length. Some of these pictures would show quite clearly where that sits. The only armament. The rest of it is 16-inch thick aluminum. That doesn't stop much. Certainly not flak, not bullets. Nonetheless, we did come back that 60 miles, spotted the field, and came in for our landing. I hollered for gear down and locked. Our engineer says gear down and locked. My navigator looked over my shoulder and looked out the side and said, the hell it is, the left gear is still up. The landing gear on a 24 falls. This one fell partway and stuck. And as we looked ahead, the Germans had occupied that field the night before, and they had set off bombs on either side of the field, left bomb craters, thinking they had destroyed the runway. We went down between those bomb craters. I was able to rocket in on the right wheel hard enough that that left gear came down and locked in place. Now, you can't tell me that we were the only ones in that airplane that day. Had to be somebody else that had plans for us for later in life. As far as I'm concerned, if you ever want a godlike experience, that one had to be it. I lost a brother in the Philippines, in Luzon in the Philippines, on his 81st continuous day of combat. It was just my brother and I and my family. And my parents had received the telegram about his death. And after making this landing, it was about 3 days before we were able to get back to our base. When we got there, our CO handed us telegrams that he had ready to mail to our family. I stood there tearing mine up and kind of tears, but I wish I'd have kept it for a souvenir. But I was so grateful that my parents never got it, because that would have just been the end of their existence if they had felt that both of us had been sacrificed to that war. So luckily, I made it.